Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be working on kind of mobilizing the posterior hip, so glute space, backside, for kind of like tightness, muscle contraction deep within the glutes along the line of the sacrum, possibly piriformis, glute max, could be a few other structures, muscle and other structures that are involved. So we're going to be going through figure 4, a little bit of hip mobility with the foam roller as well. So let's get started. So we're going to start with our staff, doing some light shoulder mobility. So we're going to get a nice shoulder width grip on the staff. This is where I want to imagine that we're trying to bend or break the staff into two. So we're trying to bend it like we're bending it from the wrist, but also from the elbow. I want to feel those elbows spiral up towards the ceiling, and then also feeling it at the shoulder blade, feeling the shoulder blades pack down onto your ribs. I don't want shoulders rounding up the upper back. So locking in those shoulders, locking in the elbows, locking in the wrist. Starting out with the staff down in front of the hips, we're going to get into our nice crocodile breath, imagining that we're abdominal wall, front, side, and back is a balloon that we're trying to expand out and away on our inhale. Our exhale, we're drawing navel in, up and in towards the spine. I'm going to get a side view on this. As we get that nice inhale, start to kind of notice how your pelvis naturally moves. That inhale breath, filling up that crocodile. Exhale, as we draw the navel into the spine, we get a slight scoop of the pelvis. As we're going from inhale to exhale, start to play with that movement of the pelvis. On your inhale, allow the pelvis to turn forward like it's moving down towards the floor. On the exhale, as we draw that navel in, scoop actively. Notice that the more we scoop, the more you're going to feel your glutes contract. It's okay to have a light bend in the knees. Again, nice full inhale, filling up that crocodile breath. Exhale, scoop. Notice your core kind of engage, light up as you get that nice scoop. On the next inhale, as we fill up, on the exhale, we're now going to engage into our shoulders by exhale, drawing navel in, elbows are moving up towards the ears and drawing them back as far as we can comfortably without going into pain. Inhale, let the arms come forward. Exhale, scoop, draw that navel in. I want to get that good scoop in order to pull the ribs down as we draw our elbows back. Now, how far back you go with your elbows will depend on what your thoracic and shoulder mobility is. So if your end range is only going to here, then we're just working up to that spot and we're squeezing into it. Inhale, letting it soften. Exhale, squeezing into it, seeing if we can get a little bit more with each one until we find kind of what our range is with good exhale, good scoop, and drawing those elbows back. Now I want to do about 10, we can even work up to 20 reps for the shoulders right now. It's a good warm up. We'll let the arms drop down. We're going to move the staff to behind the body. Palms are now facing back towards the backside. Still getting a nice shoulder width grip and continuing to bend or break the staff in two, except we're bending it away from the body. Elbow pits are still spiraling forward. Shoulder blades are still drawing down and packing down on the ribs. That should kind of open up the chest a little bit, especially if you're spiraling actively through those elbows. From here, nice inhale into our crocodile breath. On the exhale, we're slowly lifting the elbows up towards the ceiling, Again, seeing how high can we go comfortably without pain. Inhale as you fill up that crocodile breath. Allow the arms to soften. Exhale, squeeze into that range. See if you can get a little bit more. Again, without forcing it and without pain. With each exhale, as you lift, continue to actively spiral through the elbows. Notice the more you spiral those elbows out and away, that naturally kind of opens up the chest. You can even somewhat lift the sternum up towards the ceiling as you're lifting those elbows to the ceiling. Again, 10 up to 20 reps to really get the shoulders nice and warmed up. Then we're going to flip our hands on the staff so the hands are now facing forward. Doing everything else is the same though. We're continuing to bend or break the staff away from the body. So I'm still spiraling those elbows forward. Shoulder blades are still packing back. Chest is still opening up, lifting up towards the ceiling. Inhale into that crocodile breath. Exhale as you lift elbows up lightly towards the ceiling. With each inhale, continue to fill up that crocodile breath. With each exhale, continue to draw the navel in and scoop the pelvis lightly at the same time that you're lifting elbows up. You can also see if you can continue to actively spiral and bend or break that staff as you're lifting it. The more you're actively engaged in that breaking or bending of the staff, you should get a little bit more opening stretch through the chest, through the top of the chest. Again, 10 to 20 reps, getting the shoulders nice and warmed up and mobile. Then we'll set the staff down to the floor, and we're going to come down all the way onto our back. So we're going to get into our hips, focusing primarily on the hips, a little bit into the spine. We're going to go through figure 4 hip mobility, shin box mobility, and then we're going to pull out the foam roller and work a few areas around the hip. And then we're going to come back and go through those figure 4 and the shin box movements a second time. So we're using the first time as an assessment, noticing where do we feel that tension, tightness, where do we feel that kind of cramping spot in the glute, getting on the foam roller to lightly mobilize, help with kind of priming the pump, getting blood flow into the muscle tissues around the hip. And then we're going to come back and reassess to see if we've got better range of motion and if that spot has toned down a little bit so that we're a little bit more mobile and a little less discomfort. So we're going to start on our back, bringing one ankle onto your knee, getting into this nice figure 4 position. And while we're here, we're going to start with just kind of getting into our crocodile breath again. Nice inhale, feel that abdominal wall expand in all directions. Belly out to the side and into the low back. You should feel your low back expand into the floor on the inhale. On the exhale, draw the navel into the spine. Now, as we're getting into that breath, we're going to start with a little bit of really light mobility from the hip, focusing on the knee that's elevated. As you inhale, pull that knee towards your chest. Let it move towards your chest a little bit. As you exhale, you're going to reach the knee towards the feet, feeling that light opening up through the front of the hip. Inhale, bring the knee back. Exhale, squeeze the knee away. See if you can feel that mobility deep in the hip socket. We'll do a good 5 reps on this side, and then we will switch to the other side. So with our hip mobility, we're going to kind of stick with 5 reps on each one for our initial assessment. After 5, we're going to go ahead and switch to the other side. Again, starting with just some crocodile breath from the position before we start with the knee. Feel that expansion, exhale, feel that navel draw into the spine. And before we get started on that knee, notice if this position with the left knee up compared to with the right knee up, just focusing on breath, is very different in the tensions that you're feeling in the hip on the right side compared to the left side. My left side, my anterior hip is already tighter and I haven't even gotten into my hip mobility. So I want to get that good assessment going early. So now bringing in our breath, nice expansion of the wall on the exhale. As you draw the navel in, we're reaching that knee away. On the inhale, we're pulling that knee towards our chest. The pulling in should unload that front hip. The reach away should draw that anterior hip into a little bit of, we should feel some mobility, some length, and maybe some stretch. And again, doing 5 reps and nice and slow. I want the speed of our reps to move with our breath. After 5, we're going to go ahead and switch back to the other side. As we switch back, I want to actively reach that knee towards the wall at our feet and kind of keep that engaged. So we're actively opening the front of the hip. Inhale into our crocodile breath, and as we exhale, we're going to lift our opposite foot off the floor, and we're going to pull that knee into our chest. See if you can pull actively from the knee. If that's really difficult, we can grab either the ankle or the elevated knee and lightly assist pulling to the chest. On our exhale, inhale, we're letting the hips rock forward lightly. Exhale, pulling knees into chest. We should feel this a little bit more deeper into the posterior hip compartment. This might be getting to where we're feeling that tightness or not in the glute space. So I want to kind of notice that. And remember, I'm still actively reaching my knee forward as I'm pulling my opposite knee to the chest. That can feel a little bit difficult to coordinate if this is a new movement for you. Once you've done 5 on that side, we're going to switch to the other side. Again, actively reaching that knee towards the wall at the feet. Nice inhale breath, filling up the crocodile. Exhale, pulling the opposite knee in towards the chest. And again, if you can do this without using your hands, then great. If you need to assist, that is okay. You can either grab the ankle, grab the leg, grab the foot, whatever you need to kind of lightly assist that pull, as long as we're continuing to reach the knee away as we pull the opposite knee towards our chest. Notice the difference, right side to left side. One of these is probably a little tighter. One side is probably a little easier to do. And that's going to be really, really important and useful information. Switching back to the other side. Again, ankle on knee. We're still actively reaching that knee away towards the feet. And at this point, we're going to let our hips rotate as if you're trying to place that elevated foot down flat to the floor. And let me do this the other way. I want to bring arms out, palms up, and nice and relaxed. Imagine this is our kind of laying in a bed of sand, and I want to make a nice imprint of my upper body in the sand. So inhale into our crocodile breath. Exhale, we're allowing our hips to rotate without smearing the sand. So I don't want my arms to slide around on the floor. I'm seeing how far can I let the hips rotate as if I'm trying to place that foot flat to the floor. Inhale, we're bringing it all the way back up. Exhale, nice rotation. Again, if you're only able to go so far without that shoulder coming up, then that's fine. Work the range of motion that you have. And with each rep, you're seeing if you can go a little bit further without moving or losing that shoulder on the ground. On the last one, as you let the hips rotate, we're going to leave the hips there. And we're going to come back to kind of wagging that knee, reaching the knee towards the feet, and then pulling it back towards the chest. It's a very light and small movement, but again, we're getting into that deep hip. That's going to get a little bit more into the anterior compartment, that the TFL, or the tensor fasciae latae area of the hip. Once you got through 5, we're going to switch and do the same thing on the other side. So again, knee actively reaches towards the feet. Arms are out with the palms up. Inhale, fill up the crocodile breath. Exhale, allow the hips to rotate as if you're placing that foot flat to the floor, only going as far as you can without your shoulders sliding around on the floor. Inhale into that crocodile breath. Exhale, nice rotation. Which side is tighter? Rotating my left side over to the right is tighter than it was on the other side. I feel it more in that anterior hip compartment on my left hip. I have about the same amount of range of motion, but I can feel there's a difference in tension. On the last one, as we reach that foot over, we're going to wag that knee lightly. It does not need to be a big movement. Moving it up towards our head and then away towards our feet. Again, feeling that mobility at the hip. Once we get through 5, we're going to bring both feet flat to the floor, and we're going to shift into our shin box position. So I'm going to start on this side. This is my easier side. So I'm starting on my easier side because I kind of want to get a good feel for the difference between right side and left side. My left side is generally my more mobile side, because my right hip in the back moves a lot better than my left hip does. So I'm in my left side shin box. Left arm is coming down to the floor, grounding through that palm. Spiral that elbow out and away. Feel that shoulder blade pack down like you're pushing down into the floor. Feel that push elevate and lift the sternum so that we're nice and tall through our spine. We're going to inhale, focusing on the back hip. So I'm in my left side shin box, focusing on my right hip. Inhale, filling up our crocodile breath. Allow that hip to reach down to the floor. We're looking at the range of motion from touching the floor, or as close to touching the floor as you can get, into lifting up and moving that hip as far forward as you can. So hips touch the floor. If it can, exhale, we're scooping the tailbone and reaching it forward so that we're getting as straight through the front of the hip as we can. Can you feel some light mobility stretch here? Inhale, allow the hip to go all the way back down. Exhale, scoop into it. Notice how far does the hip travel and where does it feel tight, tense? Where do you feel the stretch? Do you feel it in the front, or if you're getting that knot, are you feeling it in the back? Once we get through 5, we're going to do a nice slow windshield wiper transition across to the other side. And we're going to do the same thing. Grounded palm, spiraled out elbow, packed shoulder, feeling that lift of the chest to the ceiling, nice tall spine. Inhale, filling up the crocodile breath and allowing that back hip to drop down towards the floor. This is a huge assessment point. Does this hip reach the floor to the same depth as the other hip, or is it less, or is it more? Big assessment point. Exhale, we're reaching that hip forward, scooping into it, seeing how straight can we get through the front of that hip. Now, like I said earlier in our figure 4, my left hip is the tighter, especially in the anterior. I am limited on how far forward I can go. I'm also limited on how low I can get this hip to the floor. This is a normal pattern for me. I've had 5 knee surgeries on my right knee. My left hip is the compensation hip. It compensates for true instability. I'm still missing ligaments in this right knee. It is not a stable knee, so my hip compensates tremendously for it. So I have to do this mobility work in order to keep my hip from locking up completely. But there's definitely some immobility associated with this compensation pattern. Once we get through 5, we're going to slow windshield wiper transition across back to the other side. We're going to do the exact same movement, but we're going to add in our reach and rotation. So inhale, allow that hip to drop. Exhale, actively scoop. Find the first stretch first, front of the hip. Then imagine you got a piece of bread and you got a buddy like Skeletor off in the corner, and you want to reach as far as you can to hand that bread off. Inhale, we're bringing it all the way back down, reaching the hip to the floor, filling up our crocodile breath. Exhale, draw the navel in, scoop first. Find the stretch in the hip before the rotation. Maintain that stretch in the hip as you add the rotation. This one again is a really good assessment point, not only for that front of the hip, but now we're getting into some light rotation through the spine. Notice how tight it is beyond just the hip, but how does that hip relate to the tightness of the rotation? Once we've done 5, we're going to slowly transition back to the other side, grounding our palms, spiraling that elbow, pack shoulder. Inhale, allow that back hip to drop. Exhale, actively scoop as you draw the navel in, and then imagine you're sharing some bread. Oh, this side's always so much tighter. So that front of the hip, right, left hip is tighter, and the rotation is tighter because of that hip. So this is one of those nice places to assess the relationship between tension in the hip and how that contributes to tension into the spine, low back, up into the shoulders even, really up into the neck as well. And if you're feeling significant tension differences on one side compared to the other, then I would strongly encourage doing more mobility, specifically these movements that you feel that tension difference, in order to get that area, that joint to play, to move a little bit better. Slow transition back across to the other side, and now we're going to get into our folds. Folds, we're going to work through the shin. I want to reach both hands evenly through the shin, and I want to keep them square. I don't want one hand reaching further than the other. Reaching both hands even, make sure that both of the shoulders are even, and I want to reach evenly so that I'm square through the shin as much as possible. Again, I want to use this as an assessment. How does that forward fold feel? How does that feel in that glute space? How does it feel on the front of the back hip? Those are going to be, how does it feel in our low back? Those are going to be our 3 major assessment points for our folds. Again, nice exhale. Draw the navel in as you exhale. Inhale, filling up that crocodile breath. Once we've done 5, we're slow windshield wiper transition to the other side and doing the same thing. Again, nice even hands moving through that square shin. Hands reach nice and even as we exhale. Inhale, bringing it all the way back up. Now, again, this is my tighter side. So front of my left hip feels tighter, and the glute on my right hip feels tighter. And so, again, there's a reason that the shin box is one of my primary assessment points. This is getting into a function of gait mechanics. Tension on the front of one hip is going to be paired to tension on the back of the other hip. That's going to create spiral tension through the spine, all down to the feet, all the way up to the skull. So we want to find these imbalances so that we can work to get as much balance back. Because if we are moving in our gait, and gait is a pendulum, and we are out of balance on one side of that pendulum, then gait is going to be somewhat of a dysfunctional pattern that's going to create some particular wear and tear issues, irritations, inflammations. The more balance that we can have through the pendulum, having access to mobility on both sides, makes our gait more efficient and more functional. So once we've done 5 on both sides, we're going to do 5 going back and forth. Nice exhale as you reach to one side. Inhale as you come back up. We'll take another inhale into an exhale. Inhale into our fold. Take an extra breath cycle as you transition from one side to the other. And go slow as you can with your breath. Nice slow inhale. Nice slow exhale. And only reach as far as you can breathe. If you find that you're holding your breath at the end range, then back off just a little bit. Make sure that you have that you're able to nice open breath and not a tight, closed, or forced breath. And once we get 5 on each side, again, I want to have a good assessment here. How does it feel on that right side compared to the left side? I'm starting to feel my left hip is opening up. I'm getting a little bit more mobility into it. It's feeling a lot better as I'm going back and forth. All right, so we're going to go ahead and grab our foam roller. And we're going to work 3 areas of the hip. We're going to work anterior hip up in that tensor fascia lata, TFL area. We're going to get into our adductor space, and then we're going to work a little bit on the glutes right along the ridge of the sacrum. Maybe a little bit into the meat of the glutes as well. So starting with the anterior hip. Now, real important with foam roller, if you cannot support the position that you're getting into on the roller, it's uncomfortable, it's painful. You can't maintain like the level of weight that you're putting into it. Like you can't control light touch on the roller and you just put all your body weight. Then I'd rather you schedule a consultation than get on the foam roller. The foam roller can cause injuries. I want to make sure that we have good body control and we have good awareness to be able to support ourselves on it. So we're going to start. Foam roller is perpendicular to the body and it's at our waist level. We're coming down to elbows and knees in this somewhat of a modified plank position. First thing is, can you support this position? If you got back pain, hip pain, and you can't maintain this position, then you don't belong on a foam roller right now. We're going to slide that foam roller and we're going to ease the hip bone, the front bony prominence of our hip, and we're going to lightly touch it onto the foam roller. I'm not placing all of my body weight on the foam roller. Again, this is where we need to have some good body control to be able to do this. I got my right hip on the roller. I'm going to bend my right hip. I'm pulling my knee up and in so that I create a crease in the hip. And then I'm going to slightly adjust my body by sliding forward so that the foam roller moves right into that crease. When it moves into that crease, you're going to be on a muscle. That's the tensor fascia lata. It might be sensitive right off the bat. If so, I want to make sure that we're staying within our rules of pain, keeping it below a level 3 on a scale of 0 to 10. We can let that hip lengthen, let that knee back out a little bit. And from here, we're going to work about 1 to 3 inches down, and we're going to work the front and wrap around a little bit to the side of the hip. So I'm in the crease, leg is straight. I can either shift my weight about an inch or so forward. I'm still kind of staying within that crease of the hip, or I can move it back up towards that bony landmark of the front of the hip. So that's one option. What I want to seek out is the most sensitive spot that we can find. It might be sensitive, slightly painful. Again, I want to make sure it's below a level 3. Or it might just feel dense and thick. More than likely, you're going to have a sensation of like, oh, that feels like a really good spot. And that's where I want to start. When you find that spot, we want to imagine melting butter on a hot knife. I don't want to jostle around back and forth. I want to sit and let that tissue melt over the foam roller, taking nice big inhale breaths, filling up our crocodile, exhale, nice full exhale, feel the body melt onto the roller. Once you get about a 30 to 40% reduction in sensitivity on that spot, we're going to move up or down and see if there's another sensitive spot. If there's not a sensitive spot, then we're going to look at take our opposite hip and we can roll it up towards the ceiling, up to about 45 degrees, maybe a little bit more. I don't want to get all the way up to 90 degrees or where my hips are completely stacked. I want to make sure that top hip is a little bit forward of the bottom hip. But more than likely, again, you're going to find a good juicy spot in there, a good sensitive spot where we can get some melting. And again, with the melting, I only want about a 30 to 40% reduction in sensitivity. I do not want a 100% reduction. 100% reduction is more than likely going to lead to more destabilization of the joint, and I consider that risky. So I'm looking for just 30 to 40%. I want to get a little bit of change in the tissue. I don't want to try to get a full release of that muscle. So again, nice deep breaths as you feel that spot reduce by 30 to 40%. And really it should take about 60 to 90 seconds to get that reduction. We can then rotate the hips a little bit higher or move them back down to the floor. We can move up and down again within that inch. See if there's another spot in the front of that hip. If so, we'll work another minute. Nice deep breaths. Feeling that area melt. And then we can switch and do the same thing on the other side. So again, starting on both elbow, knees, placing that hip bone on the foam roller lightly, not putting full body weight. Crease your hip, pull that knee up and in, so you got to bend at the crease of the hip, and then move the roller into that crease, and then let the knee soften back out. Is it sensitive? Is it as sensitive as the other side, or is it more sensitive? If you're not quite finding a spot, again, you can move up or down, up toward moving it towards the bony prominence of the hip, or further down into the crease of the hip, and finding that nice, juicy, sensitive spot. Nice big inhale. Nice big exhale. Feel that melt. Again, melting butter in a hot knife. I like to imagine, that's the best analogy I got, is your muscle tissue that you got on that roller is melting butter. If you put a hot knife to butter, it doesn't take any effort. It melts itself. All you got to do is just apply light pressure. And that's what we want here. As you get a 30 to 40% reduction in discomfort, we can move up or down, seeing if we can find another good juicy spot. If you're ready to start, if you're not finding anything on the front, we can then start to rotate the opposite hip up towards the ceiling or back down to the floor. This changes the fiber orientation of the muscles that we're on, and sometimes it will help kind of get into some of those deeper layers where things are a little stuck. Again, the main thing we're doing here is what we call tissue ischemia. We're pressing into the muscle tissue and just squeezing out all the blood flow to it, making it ischemic. That's what that means, for about 30 seconds until we feel that reduction. And then when we come off of it and we move, we're getting a rush of fresh blood flow. So the idea here is it's helping to bring in fresh nutrients into an area that may not have good flow going into it, removing the waste that might be building up. And that seems to be a helpful way of getting that muscle to somewhat reset, which allows us to come back to our movement and then apply a good neurological range of motion. So as we're feeling that spot reduce 30 to 40%, seeing if there's one last little area. Again, we can kind of move up or down, or we can rotate down and up with the opposite hip, really trying to isolate that nice juicy spot. Again, don't want pain over a level 3. Super important with the foam roller. Pain needs to be within our scale, 0 to 10, below a level 3. Level 1, level 2, slight discomfort. I don't want to be elevated in that level of pain where our body starts to clench and protect. That means you're doing it too hard and it's too much, and you're going to have the opposite response of the foam roller than you want. Instead of things softening and getting more mobile, it'll actually get more tight and tighten things up even harder. All right, so we're now going to change position. We're still in our modified plank, but we're now placing the foam roller so it's perpendicular with the body. And I want it to be above, at the hip, but above the hip. We're going to pull our knee as high up as we can and just simply place the inside bony prominence on the foam roller. Again, I'm slightly in a modified plank on my elbows. My knee is hiked up. I want to keep the hip, the angle at our hip at 90 degrees or less. I don't want that hip to open up where the knee is down low. This is going to get into a different area of our leg that is not going to be as useful. Keeping that knee high is where we're going to get into that adductor space better. From here, we're simply going to let our hip, our body slide towards our knee. Again, keep that knee elevated up towards your chest. And from here, we're going to slowly roll all the way up to at least halfway up the thigh, if not all the way up into the hip, as far as we can go. And really this halfway up the thigh to the hip, this is where I want to be soft and sensitive and kind of feel where is the spot? Where is that sensitive spot where it's like, oh, that's the good juicy spot that I need to work on. It might be further out towards the middle of the thigh. It might be deeper up in the hip. Once you find it, you can relax your arms a little bit. You can drop down. If you have good control, if it's not too painful, you can take some tension out of the body. Nice deep breaths, melting butter on a hot knife. As you get that 30 to 40% reduction, we can come back to kind of seeking where's the next spot. We can move up or down. We can move down towards the knee or up higher into the hip. And if you're kind of struggling to find a spot, the next thing we can do is, again, keeping that leg soft on the roller, lightly start extending the knee, the foot, and playing with a little bit of knee flexion, knee extension, and just kind of like, what do you feel on that foam roller? Can you hunt out another sensitive spot with by reaching and extending and flexing the knee? The last part we can add in here is, with our knee extended, we can rotate the foot like we're turning the toes down towards the floor or turning and rotating them up towards the ceiling. Again, this is largely just orienting, pushing into those muscle fibers and seeking out where are things tight and contracted. When you find it, allow it to rest and get back to the melt. Nice deep breath. Exhale, melting butter. Once we get about a 30 to 40% reduction, ooh, I just found a good spot, then we're going to switch to the other side. So, shifting to the other side again, coming to our elbows in the modified plank. Foam roller should be hip and a little bit above the hip, pulling that knee as high as we can so that we're less than 90 degrees or less at the hip. And then shifting the weight forward so that foam roller comes up to about the mid-thigh. And from here, we're moving up towards the hip and back out, seeking out that most sensitive spot. Now, if you find a sensitive spot right off the bat, then I suggest kind of starting out by melting on that spot before you go seeking out the next. Again, we want to make sure we're keeping below a level 3 throughout. I do not want to go level 3 or above. When you find that spot, nice deep breaths. Exhale, allow your body to melt. As you're seeking out these spots, again, we can add in extension and flexion of the knee. Again, moving slowly. So we can kind of find, like you might find as you lightly extend that, oh, there's a really good spot, and we can let that melt for a little bit. We can also add in our rotation, turning the feet down towards the floor, or turning the toes up towards the ceiling. I got a good spot right there. Toes down, leg extended. That is a good juicy spot. Foam roller is still a good assessment tool as well. We went through our mobility work, noticing differences right side compared to the left side and where it felt tighter. Foam roller is going to have similar qualities. You're going to notice areas where it's more sensitive, maybe more painful, definitely like thicker on one side, lots of differences. It's really interesting to connect what we feel on the foam roller to what we feel in our movement, because what's interesting about it is sometimes where it's tighter in our movement is not where it's tighter or more sensitive on the foam roller. Sometimes it's the opposite side. All right, last spot. Foam roller is going to be perpendicular to the body. This is going to be a position in which we need to have good inverted position, being able to lift up onto our hips. So if shoulders are an issue, this may be a difficult position to get into. We're going to lift up and we're going to sit our hips lightly onto the foam roller. I basically have my sacrum on the roller. But I have body control. It's not full body weight. I can maintain how much weight I put onto the roller. From here, we're just going to lightly roll up and down the sacrum, coming up to the very top of the hip, not going into the low back, and then down to the base of the sacrum, not quite going all the way down to the tailbone. Again, I don't have full body weight on the foam roller here. As I'm going back and forth, notice how does it feel on the right edge of the sacrum compared to the left edge, going into the right hip and then going into the left hip. Is one side a little bit more sensitive than the other? If so, let's start on that side. Find where that sensitivity is. At what point in the sacrum, either down towards the tailbone or up to the top of the hip, is it? Stop at that point, and then we're going to turn into it about 20 to 40 degrees. So I'm starting on my left side. Allow both knees and your hip to rotate to about 45 degrees. That's going to move you onto that left side of the sacrum. Again, I want to keep pain below a level 3. So if this is a sensitive area, then kind of find your position to where you're maintaining below a level 3. Not tight, tensing up, and you got full access to inhale and exhale. As you're on this area, you can let the leg of the side you're on soften, let it straighten, and kind of let it give way into gravity. As we get that area to melt, we can then start to move up and down on the sacrum again, seeking out where the next sensitive spot is. Is it below that where you were? Is it down towards the tailbone? Or is it up higher towards the hip? And when you find that spot, take a nice deep breath, exhale, and melt. Again, we can work up and down, and we can go a little bit deeper into the glute musculature by allowing the hips to rotate another 20 degrees or more. This is going to take us away from the sacrum a significant amount. We're now getting into the meat of that glute tissue. Again, make sure we're not getting into elevated pain. Hopefully by working that edge and moving out, the sensitivity goes down as the tissue melts. That's one of the benefits of using breath and melting on the foam roller. It actually allows you to get into the foam roller a little deeper than if you're jostling back and forth on it. One last little area we can get into on the roller is coming up high. As we're rotated fully, moving the roller as high up into the corner of the hip as we can. I'm still on the glute space, but I'm kind of in that upper region of the glute. This sometimes is a nice little area that could use a little bit of attention. Again, nice deep breaths. Breathing into the crocodile breath, exhale, drawing navel into spine. Once that area melts, we can come back up to our starting position and then switch to the other side. As we turn the hips, again, about 20 to 40 degrees, we should be right on the edge of that opposite side sacrum. If you're not on a sensitive spot, we can move a little bit up and a little bit down, moving up towards the top of the hip and down towards the tailbone. Feeling into what feels like a good, meaty spot. Sensitive. If it's not super sensitive, you just might find like it feels good in other ways. Like it just calls to you. It needs that attention. Once you find it, nice deep breaths, melting butter on a hot knife. And again, 30 to 40% reduction in discomfort is all we're trying to get. As that spot starts to melt, we can work a little bit up and down the sacrum again, moving towards the tailbone or up towards the hip. For my right side, it's up higher than it was on the left side. So I got a good spot at the very top crest of the sacrum, right before it gets to the upper area of the hip. As you start to feel that those areas melt, we can turn into it about 20 degrees more. At this point, we're a little bit off the sacrum. We're getting a little bit more into the meat of the glute. Again, you might find that this area is tighter, more sensitive, more dense on one side than the other. It's a huge thing to pay attention to. Really, really good assessment. What is going on in the tissue quality of the hips? Comparing that to what we're feeling in the mobility quality of our hips when we're doing our movement. And as this area starts to melt, again, we can either move up or down, or we can turn just a little bit more into it and come up into that high corner of the hip, of the glute, as high of the in that glute space, away from the sacrum, up towards the top of the hip. Again, should be kind of a nice meaty area. Should feel really good to get into. And as that starts to melt, we'll set the foam roller off to the side. And we're now going to go back through our mobility work. So coming all the way down to our back, placing ankle on knee, and starting with nice crocodile breath, filling up that abdominal wall. Inhale, allow the knees to move towards your chest. Exhale, reach that knee away towards the feet. Again, just doing 5 reps. And this is a reassessment from what we did earlier. So I want to notice, how do each of these movements feel differently now than they did at the beginning of the session? Are things more mobile? Are things loosened up? Has that not kind of reduced a little bit? Once we do 5 on one side, we're going to switch to the other side. Nice big crocodile breath. Inhale, brings the knee to the chest. Exhale, reaches it away towards the wall at our feet. Once we've done 5, we're switching back to the other side. Now, actively reaching that knee away. Opposite knee is pulling towards our chest, lifting up, pulling the entire leg towards our chest as we exhale. Again, if we need to use an assist with our hands, that's fine. Inhale, everything moves towards the wall at our feet. Exhale, pulling the knees in towards our chest while we are actively reaching that elevated knee away towards the wall at our feet. After 5, switching to the other side, same thing. Actively reach that knee away. Pull the opposite knee in towards the chest. Inhale, letting it out. Exhale, pulling it in. Can you pull a little bit more with each one? And how does it feel compared to the beginning of the session? My left hip feels looser. I need to get into my other positions to determine how much looser, but so far it definitely feels looser than it did at the beginning of the session. After 5, we're switching back across, actively reaching that knee away, allowing, this is where our arms are coming out to the side, palms up, nice bed of sand, imprint of our upper body in the sand. Inhale, filling up our crocodile breath. Exhale, letting the hips rotate as if you're placing that foot flat to the floor. Inhale brings it all the way back up. Only going as far as you can without pain and without losing the shoulders. I don't want to slide around or lose our perfect imprint in the sand. On the fifth one, as you go as far as you comfortably can, and then we can play with that knee again. Pull the knee towards the chest lightly, reach it away towards the wall at our feet, and getting into that light mobility of the hip. After 5, we're switching to the other side. Ankle, actively reach that knee away. And then allow the hips to rotate as if you're trying to place that foot flat to the floor. Inhale, bringing it all the way back up. So my left hip feels a lot looser here. I'm able to open it up considerably more. Where I'm still feeling a little residual tightness is a little higher up into the hip or into the low back on this left side. Once we get to 5, our fifth one, we're rotating into a comfortable position. We're staying rotated and we're adding in that knee. Reaching the knee away, pulling it in towards the chest, reaching it towards the wall at our feet. This feels a lot more mobile on my left hip. Once we're through 5, we'll bring the feet back. We're going to come back up into our shin box position. Palm down, grounded, spiraled elbow, packed shoulder. Inhale, filling up the crocodile, letting that back hip drop. Exhale, scoop as we lift. How far forward can we go? Inhale as we let it drop. Exhale as we scoop into it. How does this feel compared to earlier? This is a big assessment point. Hopefully we're getting a good amount of mobility in our range of motion from the floor to how far forward we're able to go. Once we've done 5, slow windshield wiper across to the other side, grounded palm, spiraled elbow, packed shoulder. Inhale, let that back hip drop. My left hip is now able to lightly touch the floor, so that's more range of motion. Exhale as we scoop into it. Still feels tight through the front of this hip, but I got a little bit more range that I'm able to get into. I'm able to start to feel my glute contract, so I'm getting a little bit more extension of the hip. But I actually feel like I could use a little bit more foam roller right here through that TFL in this left hip. Once we've done 5, slow transition back to the other side. Doing the same thing, but we're adding in our rotation, our sharing of bread. Inhale, hip is down. Exhale, scoop first. Load the front of the hip and then add to it. I don't want the rotation to take away from the stretch at the hip. Inhale brings it all the way back. Exhale, scoop and reach. Once we've done 5, slow transition back to the other side. Grounded palm, spiraled elbow. Inhale, hips down. Exhale, scoop, and then reach and rotation. How much has the range of motion improved? Have you gotten more mobility in the hip and in the rotation through the spine? And if it still feels a little tight, again, the movements that you feel difference, right side compared to the left side, those are movements that as long as it's not painful, you want to work on those movements throughout the day. 3 to 5 reps periodically throughout the day can work magic on bringing range of motion back into specific joint patterns. Transitioning back across to the other side, and now we're going to get back into our folds. We're going to go folds, and we're going to go ahead and just alternate side to side. And we're going to do at least 10 total folds. For the first 3, we're using the shin as the arrow, and we're keeping our hips in the same shin box position. Nice exhale as you reach. Inhale as you come back up. Take another inhale and exhale as you transition so that you're ready to exhale as you go to the other side. This is a great place to compare. How does the left side feel compared to the right side? In what ways does it feel tighter, more restricted, and where? This feels a lot more open and mobile than it did the first time around. Now, once we've done 3 on each side, we're going to continue to go back and forth, but we're going to start to open up our shin box, letting that back leg slide open a little bit more with each one. By changing that position of that back hip, we're going to be adding in a little bit different layers of mobility into that back hip. And we ought to be able to get a little bit more mobility into the glute of the opposite hip. So with each one, we're slowly opening up that shin box a little bit more. And a little bit more until we get really as close as we can get to what we would consider like a yoga class pigeon pose. But I am less concerned about that end range pose. I find that all of these in-between positions are really valuable to work into. That end range pose of pigeon, not everybody can do it. And sometimes trying to achieve it when you can't do it is potentially hazardous and can lead to injury. So I'm less concerned about working into an end range pose as I am with improving the quality of movement of everything in between that pose. The better the quality of movement in between the pose means that eventually the pose, that end range, will become available. But we got to focus on the quality of movement first. I'm probably getting to more than 10 at this point. I love the shin box. Going back and forth between the pigeon is one of the movements that really opens up the hips and the low back for me. All right, we're going to finish up by coming on to our back, making nice big C shapes with our hands, placing the hands around the abdominal wall below the rib cage and above the hip bone. Thumbs are in the back, feeling into the low back musculature. Index fingers are wrapping around the front, feeling into the abdominal wall of the belly. And the palms are pressing into the side of the body. And I want to cinch down on our exhale in order to create a resistance for our inhale breath to push out and away. And I want to feel that pressure push into the thumbs and from the low back, pushing into the index fingers through the belly and pushing out into the palms, side body. And we'll get a good 5 breaths, and with each breath, see if you can inflate that balloon a little bit bigger. And with each exhale, navel to spine, full expression. Draw out as much air as you can. And then fill up as big as you can. After 5 breaths, we'll let our arms soften down, relax, palms up. Feel your shoulders relax down to the floor. Feel your head soften down to the floor. Nice breaths in. We're still filling up that crocodile breath, but we're also allowing that breath to move up into the chest, into the ribs. Feeling that kind of balloon action of the ribs. Breathing into the chest, out through the sides, and into the upper back. Exhale, we're releasing all tension. We're melting down to the floor. Inhale, fills up that balloon, fills into tension. On the exhale, we're letting that tension melt off the body and kind of rinse off onto the floor. And when you're ready, you can slowly get up. Pay attention to sit again when you get up to a sitting before you're standing, making sure that you're not dizzy or lightheaded, especially after doing any kind of deep breath work.